Welcome to Capitol View, the program where we talk about state issues, sometimes federal issues, and how they just might affect your life. You know, it just stays busy even after the election with all that's going on in the world. And here we are again. I'm Bernie Schoenburg from the State Journal Register. Joining me today, Amanda Vinicky is back. She is with Chicago Tonight on WTTW TV in Chicago. Amanda, welcome to the program.
It is awesome to be here with you, especially at this time, Bernie. Congratulations on an awesome career.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, there's a little retirement coming up, but that's a few days
away,
so we'll go on. Jerry Nowicki is also here. He is Bureau Chief of Capitol News Illinois at the State House. Jerry, welcome back.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Bernie, and congratulations to you.
Well, thanks very much. Amanda, let's start with you. Mike Madigan has been in the news a lot, and he has not been charged, as he will strongly tell you, with any wrongdoing, but some people close to him, including longtime lobbyist and former state representative Mike McClain, have now been indicted in a development that happened late in the week. Amanda, catch us up where we're at.
This was Wednesday evening. For me, it really had been a matter of not if, but when, unless suddenly there was some sort of cooperation from McClain with the feds. We all are well aware of the deferred prosecution agreement that came down over the summer, in which Commonwealth Edison admitted to a long-running scheme intended to reward Madigan and his allies in order to get through favorable legislation. And now the people who were connected and really running that scheme have been indicted. They all, in statements through their attorneys, have denied wrongdoing themselves and say that this is just overzealous prosecutors who are going after one particular politician. They don't name him, but again, Madigan is all over this 50-page indictment. But as you noted, Bernie, he is not only not charged with any misconduct, he's not specifically named. You don't see the words Madigan within the pages. What you do see all over the place is public official A, and that is identified as Illinois House Speaker. And of course, there's only been one of those for decades now. So that, of course, is Madigan.
Right. Now, the people named are, again, McClain, who still lives in Quincy, where he was elected to the Illinois House from. And perhaps you can help me pronounce her name.
Pramaggiore, or Pramaggiore.
Right, who was the CEO of ComEd, and then moved up with Exelon, their parent company. John Hooker, who was head of ComEd Legislative Affairs. Jay Doherty, who's a consultant, who was also, I guess, the chairman or head of the City Club of Chicago for a while, a very prominent position. And these people, according to the indictment, were funneling jobs and contracts to people close to Madigan. McClain, it appears, was telling them, you've got to make sure this certain law firm gets a certain amount of money. You've got to make sure that a certain number of interns at ComEd get hired each year from the 13th Ward, where Mike Madigan is, the ward committeeman in Chicago. They say, again, nothing improper was done. It's interesting that in the indictment, it talks about all of the internal controls and accounting that a company must do. And the indictment alleges that they phonied up, saying that these were legitimate expenses for ComEd, when in fact they were just doing things to help friends and companies and law firms close to the speaker. The speaker, in his statement, and Amanda, go into that, because I guess he has made this statement before, very strongly denies that finding jobs for people is anything that any legislator on any side of the aisle should shy away from, and he never expected anyone to get a job and not work.
Yeah, so the indictment came out Wednesday night, and then mid-morning on Thursday, Madigan came out with a statement, and it very closely, in cases word for word, mirrors a letter that he wrote to the Special Investigative Committee that is charged with looking into his conduct and whether it is unbecoming of a legislator enough to the point that he should be removed as a state lawmaker. And there are some differences, but in the letter he points out again that the indictment does not charge him or accuse him of any wrongdoing. He defends his work trying to get constituents from the 13th Ward jobs. He says that that is part of a duty of an elected official. and that it is not illegal. And then he takes offense to the notion that he would participate in any sort of bribery scheme, saying if they even harbored the thought that they could bribe or influence me, they would have failed miserably. I take offense at any notion otherwise. To the extent anyone may have suggested to others that I could be influenced, then they too were dead wrong. Had I known about it, I would have made every effort to stop it. So
Wow.
That's from his earlier letter, but again, sometimes word for word matches the statement that he's released in the wake of these new indictments.
Right.
So,
And
same
yet,
stubborn, sticking around.
it sounds like it at this point. On the other hand, Jerry, let's talk a little bit about the future of Speaker Madigan. As Speaker, he, all but 2 years since 1983, he's had that position. You need the votes of 60 members of the House. As of late in the week and after the indictments of his associates came out, or people close to him, we've got 3 more state representatives saying they're not for him. Jerry, can he be named Speaker by the Democratic caucus again next time? And what's going to happen?
Yeah, I haven't spoken to too many of the legislators myself, but others have reported, notably, I think Capitol Facts has said, we're roughly nearing the area where it might be that he only has 58 votes supporting him. That's preliminary stuff. Some people have gone on the record saying, I will not vote for him. Notably, Will Guzzardi, one of the leaders of the Progressive Caucus, tweeted that this morning, I think. Mm-hmm. And if that sort of snowballs into the solidified 15 votes that are going to peel off, it seems like he wouldn't have the support to become Speaker again. But who wants the job right now when your first responsibility is going to be slash the budgets in light of the failure of the graduated income tax? You're going to you're going to have to vote for a budget. You're going to have to whip votes for a budget that is going to take away a lot of the services that many Illinoisans rely on. It's not a great job at this moment. So if they don't replace, or if they choose not to give him another term, I don't know what type of free-for-all is going to ensue, but I can't imagine it's going to be pretty.
Right. Yeah. Well, a couple of the other legislators that came out are Jonathan Carroll and Sam Yingling, who are both from suburbs of Chicago. And so I think it's up to maybe 15 Democrats who say that they will not vote for Speaker Madigan. So if he doesn't turn that around, and as you say, as Rich Miller has pointed out in Cap Facts, that doesn't cross the threshold, and you're certainly not going to get any Republicans voting for Madigan. Because it is also true, and despite the fact that he's not charged with anything, even he in his letter that Amanda was reading from, or in his statement, notes that millions of dollars have been spent to make him look bad, as if he were an immoral person or dealing in illegality. Certainly you hear this from Republicans a lot, that he's so corrupt, and certainly they have built this over the years. Again, nothing has ever been charged, but because he has a law practice that helps lower property assessments on big buildings in Chicago, and the legislature doesn't set local property taxes, but does set state rules that oversee them. So people have always linked that. He has always said it never has an effect. But in elections across the state, where a Supreme Court Judge Kilbride was not retained, it was because his picture in all of the Republican and business ads showed him and Madigan. And look, he's Madigan's favorite judge. It's corrupt. This happened in the 13th Congressional District in Central Illinois, where Betsy Dirksen-Landrigan, who came very close to beating Congressman Rodney Davis in the 13th District 2 years ago, got beat badly this time. Now, it might have been more of a Trump thing, because President Trump is very popular in rural areas in that district. But she was paired with Madigan and said she'll add to the sewer of what's going on, the swamp in Washington, because she is a Democrat and took money from the Democratic Party, which of course they don't say. They just say in those ads she took money from Madigan's organization, which is the Democratic Party of Illinois, because he's also chairman of the Democratic Party. So Jerry, that seems to give these folks a reason to say, even if you're not guilty of anything, even if you're not charged with anything, you're a distraction, you're hurting our candidates.
Yeah, and it may have played on the graduated income tax too. I think it was a ripe argument to make that how could you trust your state legislators when the feds are circling around the leader of the party? Um, and it just, it gives a lot of ammo, I think, as US Senator Dick Durbin said, was it on Chicago Tonight?
A famous
That
program that we're familiar with, yes.
yeah. So, yeah, Amanda could give a better breakdown of what he said, but basically it's that Madigan at the top of the party has hurt us statewide as Democrats, and, you know, he think he should step down in that role. And, you know, the speaker role is going to come down to the 73 Democrats that we've been discussing.
That's right. And I will say, you know, you mentioned there's no heir apparent. Stephanie Kifowit of Oswego has said announced that she wanted to be speaker. She's one of the Democrats. She's an ex-Marine. She's, you know, tough person, but I haven't seen people lining up behind her yet. So again, it could be a free for all. And speaking of the legislature, Amanda.
For a second, just
Yeah.
to say, I do think, I mean, if it's not Madigan, it is certainly going to be a free for all, because despite Jerry being right, it is not a job that I personally would want, especially right now, or really anytime recently given Illinois' fiscal woes. But people want that job. You see the power that it can amass for you, although times certainly are different than when Madigan first took on that role. I also wanted to say, I think part of the equation that probably some of these legislators are going to be making, I mean, there's a calculus, right? Is Madigan a drain if you are attached to him? Or he has plenty of years behind him where Democrats have amassed all of these wins, where they have super majorities in both chambers. And while the Illinois Democratic Party largely operates as sort of an arm of the House Democrats, nonetheless, that is a big win for Democrats. And you have unions coming out in favor of him, saying that he's the one who fended us off from Bruce Rauner. So I think that's part of the calculation. But another part will be, even though now you have this indictment, again, as we've talked about, Madigan not named in it at all, what if you vote for him for speaker? Or what if you don't come out against him, and then midway through session, there is an indictment that names Madigan? I'm not saying I have any knowledge of that. Again, he categorically denies any wrongdoing, but it is very clear that the feds are circling, that they are investigating, and he would be the big catch. So everybody's sort of waiting. Is that shoe going to drop? And that has to be something I would anticipate, were I a House Democrat making this decision, a public vote that all eyes will be on. That is going to be something that I'm considering as I wait my own political future.
All right. Now, I haven't asked him myself or, you know, been in touch much or anything, but Greg Harris is a Democrat from Chicago that has been kind of the leader on budget and kind of the floor leader of Democrats lately. So he would be somebody that, you know, might get put into the mix, just as an interesting idea, you know, someone who tries to get along with both sides and is a really kind of a budget guru too. But we have to see where it goes.
Have to see.
So in the midst of all this, and Jerry, I know that you follow the numbers better than many, on COVID is still raging through Illinois, and the governor this last week had to put the state under, I guess, the whole state under, going backwards, I guess, into mitigations where they're going to close down in all 11 regions of the state indoor bar and restaurant service. So tell us where that's at and how bad things are, and if anything can get better.
Yeah, so notably in recent days, the sort of positivity rate has leveled off a little bit. You don't know if that's just because whatever batch of tests, maybe you were positive, you don't know. That fluctuates per day, but the hospitalizations keep going up, and they're approaching 6,000. And as long as that keeps going up, you risk kind of overwhelming the healthcare system and not having places to put sick people, whether it's for a heart attack, for a stroke symptoms, for whatever. As influenza hospitalizations rise, COVID-19 hospitalizations rise, you have a potential shortage of staff and beds. So that's really what you're trying to prevent at this point. And with the added mitigations, it's a major effect to places like bowling alleys, theaters.
They're even closing casinos finally, which the restaurateurs are always saying, why do you let the casinos operate when we have to shut down? But now it's extending to that kind of business that really hurt the state's bottom line too.
Right. But part of me also thinks that the type of language they're using and the type of announcements they're making right now is really sort of aimed at getting people to realize that they probably shouldn't be going to their grandparents for Thanksgiving at this point. The more mitigations you put in place, the more starker language you use, the more numbers you use to illustrate that point, you're probably making it more real to people that they shouldn't be meeting in large groups for Thanksgiving. So it's as much PR, I would say, as it is tangible, enforceable mitigations.
Yeah, and I have to say, just doing many of the daily stories for the Journal-Register about what's going on in nearby counties, there's this independent streak, and particularly in rural areas, keep government off our backs, don't tell us what to do. The mask thing has been difficult, but in like Christian and Montgomery counties, you've got the Emergency Management Agency putting out these very heartfelt pleas for people to just go along with the program, because we're having to send our sick people to hospitals outside of our territory because there isn't space. And, they've had various festivals and parties that come together. And again, Jerry, you're absolutely right. Telling people not to gather at Thanksgiving, particularly with extended members of their own family or even young folks coming home from college. I mean, how hard is that to do? And when people have virus fatigue, and yet with the promise that, there might be the solutions coming from the drug companies, the Pfizers of the world, soon, it's just difficult for people to hang in there and wait. And especially when, there's still this kind of national divide. President Trump is still the president, even though President Biden wants people to await the vaccines nicely and wear masks along the way. Speaking of kind of intense feelings about such things, Amanda, the Governor Pritzker got a little intense at one of his briefings this week, talking about kind of the attacks that have come towards him and his family because of this whole COVID situation.
Yeah, I would say that we, of course, as reporters, hear from folks that have questions, and some of it, to me, is not my position necessarily to say whether or not it's valid, but there are certainly points where it appears as if there's one set of rules for the officials and then another set of rules for others, going back to in Chicago at a time when it was effectively a stay-at-home order shutdown, and then the mayor got a haircut instead. The governor a couple of weeks ago saying, I'm going to isolate. Turned out he didn't need to due to CDC guidelines, but nonetheless, the very next day, out on the streets after to celebrate Biden's victory, and then the next day, shaming people for going out and about. So there is a degree of that. What he got really emotional about was when he was asked what he was doing for Thanksgiving. He vacillated, wasn't able to say whether he was going to be in Chicago. And the next day said that it had been because he had been apparently considering trying to figure out how to be with his wife and daughter who have been in Florida. And then he talked about how he felt as if his family was attacked, his teenage children weaponized. And you had people from both sides of the aisle saying, yes, that isn't okay. You had the attorney, Tom DeVore, who's represented Representative Darren Bailey in a lot of these lawsuits and of the other establishments, trying to say the executive orders are too much with the coronavirus restrictions, seeking a bounty for footage of the governor with his family on Thanksgiving in defiance, obviously, of what he was telling other people. So
DeVore said it wasn't I guess I saw him quoted saying he didn't think it was a bounty, but he said, I'll pay $1,000 to any reporter who gets a picture of the governor breaking his own rules.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's sort of, I think, politics these days, and clearly the governor took offense to it, as I think any parent would. And it goes to show, I think, the difficulty that any elected official, it's just what you were talking about, Bernie, you want to be with your loved ones, you care, and there aren't any really easy answers to this as you're trying to both, live your life, but also be careful, be safe. The clear answer to that is stay away from your loved ones so you don't pass anything on, but that's a lot for people to stomach.
Yeah, and part of this was a picture that I'm not exactly sure who took it, but it was a table full of people, and it claimed that one of the people at a table with maybe a dozen young folks, that one of them was the governor's daughter, and it named her. And some of these kind of non-traditional media outlets that are across the state that are put out by people who are kind of libertarian.
It wasn't her.
And the governor's office said, that's not my daughter, and it still went around. And I believe State Representative Bailey reposted it saying, look at the governor. And that kind of thing is what incensed him, because, you know, in this day and age, people get threats and horrible comments online.
About the governor of Michigan, the kidnapping plot, that has to be very frightening.
It does. Jerry, during the week, there was also a move by some state representatives, Central and Southern Illinois. Avery Bourne, Dave Severin, and Dan Calkins called for a special session to actually get some legislative input into what's going on with COVID mitigations, because they feel so many legislators, particularly on the Republican side, claim they feel left out of governor's decision-making in this. But of course, even the veto session was canceled because of COVID concerns, and Sangamon County has been spiking, although it's moderated a little bit in recent days. I mean, it was great when there were only 116 cases one day this week after there'd been more than 200 for several days. But Jerry, they're not going to have much luck in getting that special session called now, are they, or are they?
Well, it doesn't seem like it. The word that had sort of been circling around was that maybe there'd be a sort of lame duck session in the beginning of January. I don't know whether that's going to happen. I haven't really heard much on that, but in terms of meeting, the legislators sort of tied their hands in May when they decided to strip. There was a major omnibus COVID-19 package, and they stripped it of a provision that would have allowed them to meet and vote remotely. So they've taken that out of the equation, so the House can't even hold committees remotely. The Senate has made it so they can meet committees remotely, but as far as I know, they haven't put in any provisions to actually vote. So the committees they have are subject matter and basically just talking about possible solution without any possibility of taking action on them. So, you know, maybe there's some regret from the Republicans who spoke loudly against, I know there were some Democrats too, but that spoke against meeting remotely, but it's not an option right now. And there's notable angst about meeting in large groups amid this pandemic.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, even the last time during the summer when the legislature met in Springfield, the House met, especially at the Bank of Springfield Center, the old Prairie Capital Convention Center downtown, so they could be distanced, and it cost the state, you know, certainly some money to set up all those special tables and the communications necessary, et cetera. So we'll see where it goes. Hey, Amanda, Tammy Duckworth is on the national scene, our junior United States Senator. People keep talking about her, talking to the Biden, the team, if in the transition, that as it is, which has to operate perhaps without cooperation from the White House right now. But is Tammy Duckworth staying in the Senate, or what's going on with that?
Bernie, my crystal ball has no clear answers other than that she's certainly in that metaphorical actual sphere.
Yeah.
Clearly, she was on reportedly the short list for Biden for VP. She is a veteran. I think, so it is very clearly a possibility that it doesn't appear as if it is going to be defense secretary, though that was a sentence, I think, in a New York Times article. It doesn't appear as if she will be that, but she headed up the Veterans Affairs Department here in Illinois under Rod Blagojevich, something that I'm not sure she likes to brag too much about being attached to that name, but nonetheless, certainly that is the sort of position that she may well see herself in DC.
Okay, we'll see. And I'm going to stick with you, Amanda, just for one last thing. But people know the name Jim Oberweis because he's ran statewide a few times, and he's from the Aurora area, and he is a state senator. And he claimed victory shortly after this election, running for Congress against Lauren Underwood, a freshman from Northern Illinois in Illinois 14. But with more votes trickling in, it looks like she won by more than 5,000 votes. So Mr. Oberweis will maintain, well, his family still has the Oberweis dairy, which people also know well, but it doesn't look like he's going to Congress at this point, although there may be a recount, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, Bernie, I was going to say, people also probably know him because that ice cream, if you've tried it ever, it's ice cream. Of course it's good.
We all like that stuff. Well,
but
ice cream.
Oberweis, by the way, very interestingly, bizarrely, some might say, when I had interviewed him before the count was total, he said that he was planning to go to freshman orientation out in DC for Congress.
And he did. He did.
All
right, well, we have to wrap it up there for now. Jerry Nowicki and Amanda Vinicky, thank you so much for the conversation. I'm Bernie Schoenburg. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Capitol View.